earlier they used to say next exam, now it is from that few minutes. Yes. So you know what is happening in the world. Everything is available to you at the click of a button. Right? You can find out about whatever I am going to say, and many of you probably know it also. But what I'm going to tell you, try to tell you, is a few things that I learned by looking at things in our own garden, which I did not do when I was at your age. I was mortally afraid of taking biology because you have to draw more those nice diagrams. Unlike your generation, which does it on iPad or whatever, my generation would take a piece of paper, notebook, draw with a pencil, make a mistake, erase it. And if there is a eraser, the teacher will mark it. You don't get A, you get something else. Mortally afraid of biology because I could not remember the names. I can remember, tiger, potato, tomato, but I did not know the botanical name. I don't know why or how they make sense. So these are the things that prevented me from considering learning biology. But in a different version, something like 40 years later, I started looking at these things. Let me show you this. Can I see it from the back? What is this? Banga. And we can see what this is. Potato. And you can see this. And you can see this. Good. So these 4 ingredients are good enough. At least for me and my wife, this quantity is enough to make aloo bangan sabji with mirchi and tomato paste in it and make some roti or get some roti. But that is not the way I was looking at it. I was looking at it from a different angle and came to the same story, not the bangan aloo sabji story, but something else. In the process, many things got interconnected. I want to share with you what this connection is all about. I'm going to tell you, in case you did not know, all these 4 things, potato, tomato, bangan, and mirchi, they belong to the same family. Have you heard this before? How many of you heard this before? Great. So those of you who know it, enjoy and see if I'm saying things correctly. Those of you who do not know it, see if you can learn from today's story. This goes back to this one, when my daughter was a little girl, much younger than you people. You know the bedtime story, this and that. I told her about this crow story. The crow comes, looks for water, and finds water, comes up with a strategy to, it cannot stick its beak in. So it is looking for ways and means of doing it. It learns to put stones so that the water level rises. Of course, the science teacher will tell you the liquid occupies the space, liquid takes the shape of the vessel. If you put a solid, that displaces the liquid, all that dry stuff they teach you. But they don't tell you the crow story in the class because that is not considered a science class. But my daughter immediately reacted, saying, oh, this is a science ki baat. So in our house, we often talk about it with science ki baat. Well, in a scientist's house, that's all you talk about. You talk about science. This is another version of the same crow story. What is the science is all about? You observe. You record the observation. This is very important. Recording the observation is very important. And then you have to interpret. And then you must write a paper, publish in a scientific journal, which is scrutinized by experts in the field. And then you go back to making more observations, more recording, more interpretation, and more public. And as you get old, as I am, you have several publications, but they all arise in the same way. The same, this is what constitutes the practice of science. Those of you who are planning to pursue scientific career, you know at the outset what it is on. So in this little discussion we have today, what we would like to emphasize is this process of doing science. By bringing in little stories here and there. When we walk around, we see a lot of things. Today, many people live in apartments. They don't have the luxury that we had. We lived in a small house. There was a little backyard or a front yard, and there was a kitchen garden. It may not be fancy backyard or a front yard or a kitchen garden, but you definitely had a tomato, bangan, mirchi. Aloo was not that easy. Potato was not that easy, but others were very easy to see and pluck those vegetables. But at that time, we don't worry too much about. We know how to look for a potato, we know how to look for a bangan, we know how to look for a tomato, but we don't know much about it. We know how they taste because mother has made the cooking. But there are people like Jesse Bose who discovered wireless, famous for discovering wireless. He, after publishing a set of papers in physics, was fascinated by looking at the sensory perception of plants. That is the picture of J.C. Bose, and that's a little plant. Many of you must have come across this plant. If you touch it, it will immediately. And there is a botanical name and there is a Tamil name. I did not find out the real name, but you know what it is. But what this gentleman did was to realize that they have a sensory perception. You know, when you touch something hard, you feel it. When you touch something soft, you feel it. So he said immediately, and then went about trying to find out the mechanism with which they are able to sense. Now, I am not J.C. Bose. In our garden, thanks to Mr. Sathyamurthy who had put those plants, one day I was looking at it and I asked, is this what, cherry tomato? I have never tasted it, I've never plucked it. But then the gardener said, nahi saab, ye to mirchi. I said, mirchi? But looks like a tomato. He said, mirchi hai. I asked him, is it hard? Because I wanted to taste it and find out. If it is tomato, I have no problem. But if it is mirchi, I have a problem. He said, yes. It is hot, or how hot? You know, how a gardener says, very hot. Then I decided I have no point in asking him. So I asked my colleague, Prasad, Madam Devasmita, who knows him, he's a ecologist. He said, it's a mirchi. I said, how do you know it is a mirchi? He said, very simple, look at the flower. I looked at the flower. She showed me the flower. It has 5 petals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And he said, look, there is a stigma. I don't know why they call it stigma. I don't know whether she knows it or not. I have no idea. You know, people say there is a stigma. But here the stigma means it is a little rod that sticks in here called a stigma, and bottom here is the ovary and the top here is the spine. And then there are 5 animals. I could easily sell, ye to nag hai, panch nag hai, usko puja karo. There will be some people who will take it, फिर वो मिर्ची तोड़ के उसका पूजा करने लगते हैं क्योंकि इसे नाग पंचमी. But we did not do that. I'm not saying don't do that. It's up to you. It's your imagination. But this much I knew. Immediately Prasad took me. He said, look at this flower here. They all follow the same path. If this flower belongs to a plant which gives you this mirchi, then that flower belonging to the same that plant also is giving mirchi. In other words, without tasting the fruits, he said by looking at the flower, you can say which plant it is. I learned a very important lesson. This is, of course, we have a chili plant in our balcony. I just clicked it for the sake of showing yet another picture. And when you go to the market, this is a standard one. The one I showed you, and you all immediately said it's mirchi, is this patla mirchi. Very hard. Okay? But then I went to the market and the fellow said, Sahab, ye mirchi hai, ye bahut hotter than this. Oh, this is called Guntur mirchi. You know, Andhra. You go down from Orissa, further down, you have Andhra. So Andhra people, they eat a lot of mirchi. I don't know how much mirchi you eat here, but this is definitely mirchi. But now, how do you decide hot and hotter? For the gardener, it's okay. Ye to kadwa hai, bahut kadwa hai, change hai. You know, these are descriptions. But scientifically, you need a better description. You want a quantitative description of what hotness is, how to measure hotness. You can see it to measure the pungency. That is a word that uses. It is very simple. Take mirchi, grind it, with milk in, put it with the ghee, put it with the alcohol. Then you start adding more and more water. See how much water you add until you reach a point where you cannot taste the hotness. This is done in a quantitative, scientific manner. And this has a name, it's called a Scoville unit, Scoville heat units. That tells you how hot a mirchi is. India can say, you know, many things we try to say we are number one. We can say we have the hottest mirchi on earth in India. And I will show you a picture in a minute. I want to give you an idea how hot a mirchi can be, maximum hot. They contain what is called a capsaicin. If it is a pure capsaicin, that means the entire mirchi is made up of this chemical capsaicin. It will be 16 million SH. That's the hottest. Any other mirchi, for example, Tejpur mirchi, a friend of mine was buying 250 grams of Tejpur mirchi, 250. I was surprised. I knew cashew sells at that price, but I didn't know mirchi sells at that price. He told me, yes, it's very hot, I am buying it. Of course, when you are in the area like Sikkim, where my daughter studied, it's very common to have momos with the chili sauce, with the Tejpur mirchi. It could be from somewhere else. The hottest that India has in the world is Bhuj Jalokya. Is 1.6 million SHU, which means 10% of the mirchi is pure capsaicin. That gives you an idea, which means there is room for a hotter version of Bhuj Jalokya. By the way, our garden variety, even this one, which I showed you, a little spicy one, can be 0.00. Maybe 0.00. It depends on this particular mirchi. I am not going to taste and find out. If I taste it, I will not be able to give the rest of the lecture. That is a Wikipedia picture of Bhuj Jalokya. Has anybody seen Bhuj Jalokya? You have seen. Now, if you can send me a picture of the real mirchi, I would appreciate it. Yeah. That is a picture of the chemical formula of capsaicin. I want to show you something very interesting. A part of this molecule is vanillyl group. It is this vanillyl group which makes your vanilla nice ice cream. But that vanillyl group in this formula has the opposite. That has a cooling effect. This has a heating. And you know, because it is so hot, Bhuj Jalokya, Indian Army was definitely interested. So why would the Indian Army be interested? Sabji mein dal sakte hain, pickles bana sakte hain, chutney bana sakte hain. What else do they want to do? But they have a better plan. What they do is, they say, look, if you can have this mirchi powder and apply it to spray on the guy will run for his life. So in the warfare, in principle, you can use mirchi. In whatever way, I leave it to your imagination. So what the defense people did was to study, can we grow a lot of Bhuj Jalokya all over the country? If not all over the country, at least in a few places. Every time to go to Nagaland, and collecting this brinjal is not easy. If you can grow it in your backyard, that is the best. The director of the Gwalior lab told me that doesn't work that way. Naga brinjal is hot. It is both in Nagaland. But in Gwalior, it is not. A tiger in the forest is a tiger. But a tamed tiger is no longer the same time. So if you want to grow it in your backyard, you must know how good or bad this plant is growing. So finally, they decided that it is not worth growing it in Gwalior. The pungency of a pepper depends on the soil and farming. So before you undertake to cultivate some chili crop in your land, you please find out the quality of the soil, what will grow there, and how far. Very important. Part of the strategy that you must adopt. And here is the picture which I did not. Dr. Raj was bringing me those samples. I didn't want to ask him to bring more and more chilies. That is your bell pepper. Bigger, but you can eat it with just like that. Zero, practically zero calories. Then normally this would have ended there. But my friend Prasad, faculty in IISER Mohali, didn't stop. He said, you know, chili belongs to the same family that tomato and potato. I was really taken by surprise. I did not know. I said, how do you know? He said, look at the floral diagram. Their flowers have the same characteristics. They have, this is the one indicated in green is a sepal, and there are 5 petals. And then there is a gynoecium, and that is the androecium, and then you have the other. So you have the gynoecium here, and these are the 5 anthers, and then you have 5 petals, and then you have. This is a general characteristic of a floral diagram for mirchi, and it turns out for other members of the same family or the family. Solanaceae family, how slowly I was beginning to get used to the names. He told me it belongs to Solanaceae family. And we already talked about chili. I showed you pictures of, I showed you samples of eggplant, tomato, and potato. I did not get tobacco. It must be available in the market, but I have. What is important is that they all have flowers of the same symmetry. So now Prasad has to convince me, show me more samples and convince me that they belong to the same family. So next visit was to the garden and look for the eggplant. And sure enough,